So first off, moment of reflection. Thank you. And just before I get a confirmation of the agenda, I just want to announce, and most of you people are aware, I'm sure, that past warden Dave Shear passed away, and the flags have been at half-mast until today at the county here. And the obituaries on Yitzi's out of Milverton, I believe it was. And the other thing was yesterday in the legislature, Randy Pettipiece paid tribute to past warden Mert Snyder and his years of service to municipal life. And if you need a copy of that, I can get that to you, but I'm thinking he was sending it out to most people. Did you get that, Councillor? Oh, well, then maybe we'll have to just send that out. Okay, so first off, confirmation of the agenda. Mover and oh yeah, sorry, we need to make disclosure of pecuniary interest, either now or any point in time through the meeting. And then we will move on to confirmation of the agenda. And if I could have a mover and a seconder, Councillor McDermott, Councillor Wilhelm. Any questions about the agenda? Those in favor? Let's carry. So now we have consent agenda. And I have items 5.1 to 5.8 in the minutes from October 7th, 2021. Does anyone want to see anything pulled for further discussion? Not seeing any hands. So I have a motion that council receives consent agenda items 5.1 to 5.8 and approves the October 7th, 2021 council minutes. Moved by Councillor Kellum, second by Councillor McKenzie. Last chance for questions. Those in favor? That's carried. Perfect. So now we're going to move on to public meetings, hearings, and delegations. And first thing on the agenda is the MPAC Council presentation. And we have Ann Haynes and Jeremy Gow. So we can get them up. There's Ann Haynes. Did I pronounce that right?
Are you supposed to be on this as well? Yes.
Morning.
Good morning, Ann. So, is Jeremy coming on too?
Think so.
I see his name showing up, but I don't see anything other than his name.
There he is.
Good morning. There he is. Perfect. Good morning, Jeremy. So we're ready for your presentation. You, I assume, want to share the screen or not?
Oh, okay. I
don't
wasn't
have to.
sure.
We've already got it in our package, but I'm just giving you the option.
Okay. I'm not sure. Can I share my screen here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there we go.
Okay. So let me just let me know if you can you see that now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning. As mentioned, my name's Ann Haynes and I'm the regional manager in Zone 1 with MPAC. I joined the team in Southwestern Ontario back in February. And just a little background, I've worked in both valuation and stakeholder relation roles throughout my 30 plus years in property assessment. And I have with me today Jeremy Goff, who is our account manager for Perth County. So I first just want to start and thank Council for having us here today. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about who we are and what we're up to and what's new. So first off, I just want to say MPAC is an independent, non-for-profit corporation funded by all Ontario municipalities. And our role is to accurately assess and classify all properties in Ontario in compliance with the Assessment Act and regulations set out by the province, the Government of Ontario. We're accountable to the public through our board of directors. They provide governance and oversight to MPAC, and they ensure overall direction, effectiveness, supervision, and accountability throughout our organization. We have 13 members on our board. 7 of them are municipal representatives, 4 are property taxpayer representatives, and we've got 2 that are provincial representatives. And if you want more information on our actual board members, you can get that at our website at mpac.ca. So I'll now move into a little bit about the parties. We talked about MPAC, a little bit about the government, but I'll also say, in addition to the government setting the legislation and the regulations and policies that help inform our assessments and how we do those assessments in Ontario, there's also an independent body, the Assessment Review Board, that adjudicates appeals under the province. And as well, often there are tax policy issues and changes that affect the way we assess properties. And again, this is also under the jurisdiction of the province. So if you own a house in Ontario, as you know, your local municipal councils determine the budget and set the tax rates annually. And the taxes are based on the rates set by the councils, and our assessments are used, multiplied by the tax rate, and the bill is levied from there. So if an owner has a question on their actual property tax, we ask them to speak with their municipality. If an owner has a question about their home's property assessment or the valuation we arrived at, we ask them to get in touch with MPAC. So our staff live and work across the communities in the areas that we work in across Ontario. Our local knowledge and our experts help us deliver impartial property values that reflect what's going on in your communities. And our assessments have met or exceeded international standards and best practices in the industry. So what's new? MPAC periodically updates every single property in the province of Ontario. We call this an assessment update. And it's when we determine what each property is worth, what it could have reasonably sold for in its state and condition as of a particular point in time. So the last assessment update that was prescribed was January 1st, 2016. That was the valuation date set by the province. And the assessment updates and the cycle itself are all set by the province. So we were scheduled to conduct an assessment update in 2020, but it was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of the spring budget, the Minister of Finance announced a decision to further postpone the assessment update and because of the pandemic. And this means for property owners that your valuations for this year and next year, 2021 and 2022, will continue to be based on that valuation date of January 1st, 2016. The government also indicated they would hold consultations on timing around the valuation date for the next update, and that the outcomes would be communicated this fall. So we're still awaiting this announcement, but yesterday the government indicated the fall economic statement will be delivered on November the 4th. So in the meantime, we continue with our work at MPAC, keeping our database up to date and getting ready for the next assessment update. We're confident that we remain in a strong position to be able to deliver on the next update whenever that may be announced. So I also want to just talk about the relationship between property taxes and valuation really briefly. A question that we are continually asked, and as I've been out in the areas in Zone 1 at council meetings, I'm getting the question, the crystal ball question of what is going to be the impact in our communities, moving from a 2016 market really to anything since the pandemic hit. We know based on the activity and the market and the sales and the volume, there's been movement and things are increasing. So it's important to note for anyone that's asking these questions that an increase in assessed value does not necessarily mean higher property taxes when we're updating everyone in an assessment update. The most important factor to focus on and recall is not how much your assessed value has changed, but how it has changed relative to the average increase within your municipality and your property type. So depending on your market and the shifts and the buyers and sellers and what they're willing to pay, you could see no change in tax, a decrease in tax, or an increase in tax. And if property owners or council would like more information on this relationship, we have a great video on our website, mpac.ca. So as we wait for the next assessment update, our focus remains unchanged. We still have lots of work to do updating the 5.4 million properties in Ontario. And we do that by capturing property changes and growth over time. This is a big component of our work, and inspecting properties and keeping up with the maintenance of changes to properties and state and condition to properties. We're constantly analyzing the market, the sales, the transactions. We're serving property owners through inquiries, appeals, RFRs. We're supporting our municipal partners by offering multi-facing systems such as Municipal Connect, local support through their municipal and stakeholder relations team, meetings, trainings, and education and awareness on products, as well as legislative changes. And we've tackled some big products through the pandemic. And one of the tasks that we looked at was the small business tax class, as well as the future of the property assessment roles through some collaboration with municipal people as well as our internal folks. So we also have statutory duties that we have to fulfill, vacancies and requests for reconsiderations. And finally, we track people data of the 5.4 million properties. The preliminary list of electors based on the 2022 fall election will be provided next year by MPAC, but we are in the transition of moving this over into Elections Ontario's responsibility. So here's a quick lens on the province, the provincial lens on assessment. So you can see here we've got the 5.4 million properties that I talked about and referenced. 4.9 of that 5.4, or 90% of the properties in the province, are residential. And we value everything from commercial, farm, industrial, residential, multi-res, etc. And it's a very complex and large database. So collectively, all the assessments in the province total $3 trillion in assessment and generate $30 billion annually in taxes. Every municipality in Ontario uses these assessments as their foundation to make informed decisions about how you're going to invest back into your municipalities. So bringing it home to County of Perth, we've got a $12.1 billion assessment, just over 17.7 thousand properties in your county. And we also have a different mix. So the provincial lens majority was residential. Your property makeup is predominantly farm, then residential, and then we move into commercial, industrial, and you can see the numbers on the screen. I'm happy to report that the net growth and the overall change from the 2020 to 2021 tax year was an addition of 101.7 million in assessment increases to your assessment base. So things are moving and growing in Perth. And on that note, as of October 14th, when I gave you your package, we had some totals that I think it was around 109 million, but I can tell you as of the 18th of October, which I'm quoting today, we're actually achieving 116 million of new assessment that would be added to the rolls across the lower tiers in Perth County. And we're already at 90% of the forecast, which is a range between 114 million and 134 million. And also happy to report that the taxation and revenue at the end of the day has continued to increase between 1.8 million a year, dropped a bit in 19 and 20 to 1.6 million. And in 2021, we're around 2.2 million so far. We've still got another week to close our year out. So we work closely with municipalities and owners to capture changes, key things such as building permits, plans. We do conduct property inspections where it's safe to do so. And we also respond to inquiries. So we always have to be pivoting to understand changes to the data, capture that for our accurate assessments. And when we make these changes, we notify the municipality annually with the delivery of their assessment roll, and we notify property owners through mailing out a property assessment notice. Also, if owners are interested in knowing more about how we arrived at their assessment, they can log in through our website to our About My Property portal. It's an online tool where they'll have access to details on their property, similar properties in their vicinity, how they've been assessed compared to their neighbors. And if they want to challenge us, they can file a request for reconsideration for free through this portal. If someone has issues with Wi-Fi or connection, they can simply call our customer contact center and we can help them out that way and send them the reports that they may require. Further, how we support you, we're committed to understanding, getting your feedback and getting your input. And we do this and work collaboratively with you, with your staff, through the service level agreement that we developed in collaboration with the Ontario municipalities. This report is available on Connect. It sets out how we work together. There are municipal dependencies and impact objectives that have to be met, and we report out those through Municipal Connect as mentioned. These reports will help with assessment-based management, budgeting, and planning for your staff. And over the years, Municipal Connect is another way we can work with you and provide you with information about what's happening to your assessment base with real-time changes. So this has been redesigned completely during the pandemic, and it's continuing to evolve to help you and meet your staff's planning needs now into the future. And I want to say, in addition to the delivery of the assessment role and the numbers and the revenue that we've been able to provide to Perth County, we regularly engage with upper tier, lower tier, and as well staff throughout the county. And I can tell you that they've been very active involved between some working groups, whether it be Municipal Connect working group, Worksite working group, or other groups that we've put together. We also have an annual survey for staff and for council on our service that you can fill out as well. And I know we've had some great meetings with county staff on financials and informations over the years. So this is a view of our province. I cover Zone 1, as mentioned earlier. That's my area. Jeremy's dedicated to you in Perth County. Our team's here to support you. We do encourage you to subscribe to our In Touch e-newsletter. It is available for council or staff, and it tells you what's going on at MPAC. You can also attend our monthly webinars, which also talk about some new initiatives and the great work that we're doing. Feel free to follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube. And lastly, I just want to say this is the full contact details of the team dedicated to Perth County. We work very, very closely with our evaluation staff in the office. And I can tell you that since I moved into the zone, I'm very impressed with the efforts and our service commitment in Perth County. I certainly look forward to continuing the conversation on service, building out those relationships and engagements with Perth, with our residents, as well as our council and staff. So we're all working together to service you. I look forward to hearing from any of you, and maybe I'll make it out to some of your local councils or staff meetings. And thank you for your time this morning.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, great. You've stopped the screen share. So now I can see people again. I'm sure we're going to have some questions. So I'm going to open the floor up to questions from the councillors with regards to MPAC and your presentation. I see Councillor Kassenberg's hand up there first. So Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, team, for MPAC for the presentation. I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'm going to try to limit them to the ones that are of highest priority at this point while we have you with us. Perhaps I will follow up separately with MPAC.
Can I just stop you for 1 sec, Todd?
Sure.
So you said you have a whole pile of questions. You're going to limit to 2 or 3 you think are more important.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could forward all the questions to us. We can forward them to MPAC, and then we can get some written responses back, and maybe next county council meeting we'll have updates on questions asked and answered. How's that?
That seems like a perfect process, Mr. Warden. Happy to do that.
Okay,
So,
but you can ask some now.
yeah, thank you. I'm just going to go after a couple of priority ones that I have at this point. I think my first question pertains to a question that has had me puzzled for a while, and I think I've teased out some of the information, but I'm hoping that you can just sort of walk me through this. But let's say there's a new home built in Listowel in 2019. Can you tell me how, what is the process for assessment of that home? How do you generate the assessed value, and how do you project the value for the next year, the 2020 year, and beyond in this case, because of the government's policy decisions on freezing the assessment at the 2020 value?
Sure. Okay, thanks for the question, Mr. Klasenberg. What I'll say is that number one, we rely on getting the building permit detail from the municipality. The occupancy and final dates is key to getting that data as well. So we partner with the staff there to receive that data in Listowel to our team. So that's the first trigger to say we've got work and it's occupied and ready to be assessed. So let's get out to the property. And in the pandemic, in some cases, we weren't able to physically inspect. So we further asked for digital plans and sharing of plans so we could do some assessments. But normally, and what we're doing right now is we go out to the property when it's ready, we inspect the property, we assess the property, and as mentioned, all values are as of Jan 1, 2016. So even though we're in your example of 2020 and the permit was taken out in 2019, every property in Ontario is backdated or valued as of that point in time of Jan 1, 2016. And that is based on the sales that took place in that window around the 2016 year. So there's obviously a sales analysis that we do to support an assessment update. But then what we would do is measure the house, inspect the house, come back to the office, key the data, issue a supplementary assessment, a notice to the owner, a notice to the municipality, and from there, if the owner has any questions and wants to challenge the assessment, they can do so through the request for reconsideration process, or if they're not happy with that process, they can pursue the assessment review board, which we talked about under the provincial government's purview. And then ultimately, the assessment roll is returned to the municipality at the end of the year. So that's sort of the timeline and the process. I hope that I hit all of the key points, but that's really the flow from the intake of the permit detail to the end result of the roll going to the municipality and the notice to the owner.
Okay, Mr. Warden, one more at this point, and then if my colleagues have questions, happy to yield the floor to them. So the MPAC website indicates that it, in 2020, sent out 875,000 notices in that year. Can you tell me what proportion of those notices are just changes of ownership? You're just sort of sending to the new owner the assessment of their property. And of course, at a change of ownership, is there a reassessment that is triggered and therefore included into the mail out to the new owner of a home?
Okay, so that's a great question about the percentage. I've never been asked that question, so I don't have the facts, but we can. It sounds like you and I maybe need to have a meeting or a chat, and we can set that up after this meeting and go through the other questions as well, if it pleases you. But what I can say, I'll get that number for you. But what I can say is ownership change, value change, address change. They all get a notice. So those 800 and some odd thousand that got notices, it is a mix of simply, a tag that there's been an ownership or mailing address change versus a value change. But there is no change to the assessment base. The only reason there would be a change is if, as a result of what we call a sale investigation. So when there's a sale on a property, we do a sale investigation. And if in that investigation, we find out information that may have been changed to the property, that with or without a building permit or any kind of just upgrading where they replaced something and didn't need a building permit, we would make note of those changes. And if there was any change to the value, that could be reflected in their notice, but they're not going to get an increase based on the sale, because the sales that were used to arrive at the valuation are that point in time that we talked about earlier, which is still 2016 at this point. until hopefully November the 3rd or 4th, and we hear more.
So other questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Wright.
So if you say everything that goes back to, I have two questions. Everything goes back to 2016. So if our warden buys a farm for $3 million, does it get taxed at the 2016 rate? Or does it get taxed on the cost of the purchase price?
Yeah, no, it doesn't get taxed on the purchase price. It doesn't get taxed on the current market. So any sales that are taking place now, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, there is no relevance on those sales on your assessed value, because our values are as of Jan 1, 2016, and the sales that inform those values would have been the 2014, 15, 16 year. So those were the sales we used to come up with the analysis. So state and condition, I built a new home, we picked that change up, but we backdated to the values of the Jan 1 2016 legislative date as set by the province.
Ooh, that's going to bring our money up there from 12.1 billion to like 16 or 18 billion. So
well, that's why I talked about the relationship between tax and assessment, so nobody would get too panicked.
Everybody's going to go up. My second question is on page, I think it's 11 years. It's on 32 of mine. Special exempt. I know churches and municipal buildings are. That's $194 million. That's equivalent to all of the industrial land in Perth County. Can you give me some broader exemptions, or maybe like $194 million in value of exemptions? Like obviously any government office is exempt, I would say, correct. Beer liquor store?
So some of the government properties are exempt, but some of them have what we call a payment in lieu of taxation. Okay, so they do pay a tax, but it's not mandatory. But anyway, what I will say is your schools, your hospitals, your churches, your, historical sort of municipally owned buildings, municipal property, they're all exempt. So they all fall into that. If you have any facilities, you've designated a municipal capital facility, they would be exempt. The Assessment Act dictates what property types are exempt to taxation. So there are some properties that, again, we have to follow that legislation as set by the province, but the lion's share of your area, I know Jeremy knows the area a little more intimately since I just moved around in February, but I would say it would be your schools, your churches, hospitals, if any, things like that would really be driving your and municipally owned property and land would be driving your exemption.
And that
just to quickly jump in there, just because something is exempt now does not mean it's exempt indefinitely. So a school is exempt while it is being used as a school. If that school sells and is no longer used as a school, if it's purchased by a private property owner and becomes a home, storage, whatever the case may be, that building would then lose its exempt status and would flip into whatever classification would apply based on its current use at that point in time.
So would I be able to go on a website and find out the special exempts in Perth County? Either the addresses or the structures, because like I said, it's as much as all of our industrial property in Perth County, which is $210 million, $194 million of exemption. There's got to be a list somewhere that I could access and say, like, why is that exempt? Or maybe there's a wetlands that's exempt or a park. I'm not sure, but there's got to be a list somewhere for a guy like me who has nothing to do at night but read.
Yeah, there's not a list. There is for municipal staff through that portal that I talked about. So if this is something that staff want to bring back and report on, they do have it available.
Good. Thank you.
Deputy Warden Higgins.
I just have one question of why do farms automatically revert to residential when another farmer purchases them, and then that farmer has to apply to get it back into farmland? In the meantime, while that's going on, the owners paying taxes on residential, and then the municipality has to rebate them. And that seems to cause a accounting nightmare for our municipalities. So why is that? Why can't it automatically just go from farm to farm?
I know Jeremy's on the farm team, so I don't know. Do you want to tackle that one, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I completely hear what you're saying. I come from a farm background as well, so I can appreciate the frustration. The important thing to note is that farm program is a tax incentive program that is not exclusive to MPAC. It's external, so farmers have to prove their status and be bona fide farmers through AgriCorp. That list is then provided to MPAC. So when a property sells and a new owner is applied, we have no idea if that new owner has been granted their status from AgriCorp or not. In a lot of instances, they may not be bona fide farmers with that status. So when we receive that listing, we're able to apply the FT tax rate to the class. Otherwise, it does slip and revert to residential use until we have confirmation from AgriCorp that the FT can be applied. And that's why you see that shift happen.
Thank you.
Can I just add a further point to what you just said? So now in agriculture, it's more consolidation than it is new purchasers thinking they're going to buy a farm and start farming. So somewhere on the records, if and Doug used me as an example earlier on, so I have my exemption with my farm. So if I was to buy the neighbor's farm, why wouldn't that be on? Surely it's on a computer somewhere saying, yeah, he's got his exemption. We don't have to go to full taxes.
Jeremy, you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So that may be the case if you already have your exemption. As soon as that listing is provided to us, it may be a quick flip to remain an FT. And there are instances, though, where there are farmers who do buy land that do not have their farm status. And as I said, until they notify AgriCorp that they have this land and they are bona fide farmers, they have their status, we're not able to apply it until that point in time. So it's not always a lengthy process. I have seen it where it's been very quickly. As soon as the sales occurred, we've received it on that next monthly update from AgriCorp. But there are instances where it does take some time and there is a process that needs to be followed. There are also timelines associated with that AgriCorp application. And a lot of instances, unfortunately, farmers are busy people. They miss that application, they miss that deadline, and they don't get it in time to AgriCorp, which causes some, I think, frustration on the municipal end and for that property owner because it creates issues for AgriCorp processing that farm tax incentive approval.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Councillor Hurlick, I see your hand flipped there. Yeah.
I've been down this road myself, and I even proved to him with AgriCorp and myself and my ID, and it was still a little, I had to convince almost. I don't want to see that going on. That's a little frustrating. I'll tell you that much when you're a farmer and you plan on farming. And I don't know what the reasoning was behind that, but got to make sure it's smooth. That's for sure. It can be a little difficult to deal with, even when you're a farmer. I've been there personally, so just take that and put it in your back pocket. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Councillor Katzenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'll ask two more and then I'll send the rest of my list. That's a wonderful strategy. Thank you. So this one is a little technical. It's amazing what you get into when you start digging. The IAAO standard describes the creation of strata. Can you outline for me what is or are the strata in Perth County? For example, listable real estate tends to be more highly valued than Moncton real estate, and the market is subject to greater swings in price and listable, perhaps over the whole evaluation time that we've talked about, including back to 2015 and before. So how is that accommodated in the equation or model that is used on general understanding about maintaining the integrity within a stratum?
So what I will speak to, because I don't have the specifics for list to well off, obviously the top of my head are prepared. So I think a follow-up meeting might be a good location or opportunity to talk more. But I will say that we do get our assessment roles provincially audited by our quality commissioner, and the IAAO vets through the quality based on the coefficient of dispersions, and some other statistics, assessment to sale ratios and other things. And they measure our success and whether we're meeting the IAAO standards or not. And I can say we've met them, we've exceeded them in some areas, but to break it down specifically to Listowel, I know in support of the next assessment update, when and if that is announced, we're going to get down to breaking it down to the municipal level. We just don't have that, I don't have that here today, so I couldn't speak to it, but happy to have that conversation as a follow-up.
Thank you. I look forward to that. And I have one last that I think is a priority at this point, and it's a methodological question. So I'm hoping that your experience in the methodology will help me here. Does MPAC have any random process for sampling the non-turnover market in each year to get a sense of the ongoing robustness of its assessment equation or model?
So for the properties that don't sell is what
Right.
you're inferring? Yeah.
Right.
So that speaks to that being aware of the data accuracy of the state and condition of the property, through requests for reconsiderations, through building permits, through vacancies, through severances, through requests for reconsiderations and appeals. We're in contact with a good number, whether or not they've sold, and we confirm the state and condition. We also do periodic re-inspections in areas where we haven't been there for a number of years to keep that state and condition accurate and up to date. So that's another commitment to work that we will do to keep that information. But between the sales and the turn that take place, those drive the majority, and there's a lot of those that change. But the other ones, to your point, that don't turn over, we monitor absolutely through other triggers and other work objects. They do come onto our radar, and then periodically, as I said, we assess, okay, which areas may require a sweep or a full reinspection and a review. But those are just some of the things that we do to make sure that the state and condition is accurate. For income producing properties, we do send out annually an ask for the owners to send in income and expense details. So again, not every property is assessed on some are assessed on the income, and we need the rents and we need the income and expense data. So again, whether or not they've sold, we're still continuing to build up that data and keep our information up to date and as current as possible.
I will want a little bit more detail about that process, because I think it behooves the taxpayers of Ontario to understand what random sampling you do outside of sale turnovers. I think that's an important premise here. I have, Mr. Warden, indulge me one little question, just a clarification of fact. You mentioned that MPAC has a quality commissioner. Is that person employed by MPAC, or is that person an independent entity to MPAC?
They're independent. Yeah, they report to our board.
So they still are in the MPAC reporting chain and not an external auditor like you would see in financial books like Price Waterhouse or
right.
BDO.
But they don't report. They're not there. They specifically report to the board, and they're not a staff member per se, they don't report to a manager within MPAC. They report directly to the board, and they have to run reports and quality checks. So they have a bit of an arm's length there, but you're right, they're not an external. That's why we go to the IAAO and get them to do their quality review, and outside other agencies to vet through the quality and attest to the accuracy of our assessment roles.
Okay, one of my follow-up questions in writing will be about that process, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I got to make a comment. You guys know me well enough. When I was reading your report, it was a very good report, but I was so extremely disappointed when I seen that they weren't going to do any new assessments until after 2022. As you noted in your presentation, we are predominantly agriculture. So in 2016, the shift in taxes really shifted to agriculture. So we've all seen what's gone on in the housing industry in the last 3, 4 years, 5. It's been a continual increase in value. most predominantly, for some reason, in the last 2 years, even though nobody was working or had money, the price of homes virtually doubled. And I realize the sale price doesn't necessarily reflect the assessed value, but I can't honestly believe for the life of me that that assessed value is not going to increase sharply. So I think and I realize this wasn't your call to put it off until 2022, but that is going to cause the greatest myriad of problems when this new assessment starts to come in. Between staff and MPAC, they are going to be swamped with appeals or inquiries or whatever. And I truly do believe that's just a complete injustice to not deal with this a little sooner than what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
So you can pass that on to the provincial counterparts for me if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll know when you know, so we're about the same level. But appreciate the concern. And if I could just go back to the relationship of assessment and taxation, when everyone is reassessed, as long as everybody goes up. Now, we know there will be markets that are higher or lower than the average, but it's really important to hang on to the fact that it's where you fit in relation to the average, not so much because everybody is going to go up, no question.
Yeah, so basically in the last year or two, farmland seems to have plateaued. Like since 2020, it's been up a little bit, but not that much. I think you're going to see industrial commercial come down. I could be wrong. I just seen Toyota's appeal of their assessment in Oxford County, and that was a $13.6 million rebate. So I'm looking at probably those industries around looking at that going, gee, maybe we can do that too. But I realize we don't get more tax dollars, it just shifts before it comes from. Like, I fully understand that, but I think it's time to maybe correct the shift.
Yeah, that is definitely a provincial.
Councillor Hurley?
After you, Warden, yeah, I've had my concerns with this as well. It's the same as anything. We're seeing all kinds of inflation, whether it's per diems. We as councillors collect everything. As much as we may be judged, we always got to stay on top and make sure things are in order. Because when the time comes, it's nasty. And I agree with 100% there, Warden. I was blown away when I heard that they're prolonging this process. I almost think this council should consider putting a letter here.
You already do. Councilor McKenzie?
Actually, Warden Aitchison addressed the main part of the question that I had. And this is maybe not a fair question to you, but bottom line is, I guess I just want to know what's actually involved in doing a reassessment. I assume you're looking at numbers. There's no on-site visits per se to look at each particular entity that's happened. And my frustration is very similar to the warden's. I fail to see why the province is kicking this down the road, because it's just going to snowball. You think we have problems now, and I know in my particular municipality, the farmers are always complaining about their assessment being too high, but it's not going to be anything like when 90% of the residents all go up and they start to complain. I'm just wondering if you can quickly explain how you actually do a reassessment, and if you have any idea why the province is so reluctant to update it.
Sure, I'll start with the last comment. We have no idea. The last comment about why the province, again, we've talked about the parties and who controls what. It has nothing to do with MPAC. They paused it due to the pandemic. That was the messaging that I gave today. That's what we were told. And they paused it to do consultations, which they've heard from some municipalities across the province. So again, that's in their purview. I'm going to leave that with them, to hopefully we'll get some answers in the fall economic statement as to when the next one might be. But as to your first question about how we do it, so when I talked earlier about continually updating our database, continually putting, receiving sales, doing sales investigations, doing property inspections, and we have a large database. We're moving from one year to the next. So what we're doing to set us up for success for when they announce the next update is just to make sure that the sales that are coming in, which really form our valuations. The sales are key. It's the sales and the market and the transactors in your communities that are driving up the values. So that's where we predominantly arrive at the values, is based on these sales, but it's mass appraisal, not single property appraisal. So there's a large database of sales. Again, we go back down to the local level to your communities and analyze there, but there's a lot of work to making sure we understand, what did you buy? What were the drivers behind buying it? Did anything change to the property before you bought it? Did anything change to the property after you bought it? And then building out that database for analysis so that we're ready, whatever the date should be, to pull the right group of sales together and analyze it. And then to Councillor Klasenberg's comments about the other properties that don't sell, making sure they're up to date, that their state and condition is accurate. We have other ways to continually refresh and update those 5.4 million properties. It's a big task, but no, we don't physically go out to every single property that's sold, but do we engage with the owner? Yes. Will some of them require an inspection? Yes, especially if they've done work and they say they've done work. If the assessment to sale ratios are out of line or there's outliers, we might want to, again, have further conversations. So it is a big process to clean up the data, get the analysis for the database to a ready state, and then to produce evaluations. So hopefully that helps answer a little bit of the first part of the question, and hopefully we'll have some answers in November on the second part. But I don't, why they paused it is in their purview and not Impact's.
I guess my one comment is going to be, don't shoot the messenger here. She's just telling us what she's been told. Councillor Kasenberg.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't help but ask one more question, because I think there may be a little bit of confusion in my brain and perhaps my colleagues too. So as we come up on a reassessment, the full provincial reassessment, my understanding is that essentially what happens is that through multiple regression analysis, MPAC essentially generates a new equation, an equation that then gets customized for each of the strata that you evaluate, and we have to talk about that strata offline, but sort of gets applied to the area, and there's some local market adjustments that are associated with that. So do I have that right? Like, are you essentially, there's one big equation, and then it gets tailored for each of the areas, the strata, as the IAAO calls them, and then you apply that essentially. And a lot of the data that's been fed in to create the updated equation is coming from all that sales data and all those change processes that you've talked about. Am I roughly right?
Yeah, some of the stuff you mentioned is accurate. So there is a database full of the sales where we do have to make sure the state what was there when it sold, and it's there. Multiple regression analysis is a tool that's used, but the approach is the sales comparison approach in industry standards. There's the income approach, the cost, and the sales comparison. And we'd have to get into an assessment 101, which we probably don't have time today to get into to explain the three. But what I can say is it's not as a matter of just flipping a switch and equation, for models. There's not models on every single property in Ontario. The multiple regression analysis is a tool used under the sales comparison approach on those properties that tend to transact the most, your residentials, your condos, your homes, your townhouses. But again, it's just a matter of having that database for the analysis at a steady state, and whether it's the income cost or sales comparison approach to arrive at the value, and whatever tools we use to arrive at the value, at the end of the day, it goes back to the sales in the community, and we test our predicted assessments to those sales, and where are we, and what's the ratio of assessment to sale, and how far, the median should be at 1, and we have that, and also in addition to the analysis that goes on, after we come up with the predicted values and we have them out there, we've got the local staff that sweeps in and looks at it and says, does this make sense? Are there factors that we've maybe missed in this particular market? That's where the local expertise has a hand in the valuations and your local values. And they really help, again, adjust or inform the process. So it's not just a computer and a button and out it goes. So I just wanted to change that. There's a lot of multiple parts and different people involved throughout the entire process. And then once the notices, of course, hit the street, we hear from the owners. We do try to work with the industry ahead of time for pre-roll disclosure and talk about things that are coming to mitigate any potential appeals or concerns, so that all of the cards are on the table and it's open and transparent. But again, some of the other appeals that have been legacy or outstanding, you know, they've been in the queue for a while. They continue to have built up and now are being settled. But we're getting out of that and we're moving into a within the cycle state. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about the analysis process, our role in the process, and our commitment to getting these values as accurate as possible.
Okay, actually, I'm going to have to stop the questions there. We've been at this for a bit here. So I know there are more questions that want to be asked, and Councillor Kasenberg was going to have a follow-up, but what I'm going to ask, if you could forward those questions to our clerk, Mr. Sager, we will forward them on to MPAC. And we'll either decide whether we want some of them answered in person or by email, if that works for everyone. And I truly do thank you for your presentation, Ann and Jeremy. It's been very enlightening. Actually, I'll be honest with you, one of the best presentations I've ever had from MPAC, so good job. But anyway, if you have questions, forward them in. We do have some other agenda items we have to get to here, so we just can't stay at this forever, unfortunately.
Thanks
Anyway,
for your time.
I thank you for your presentation this morning.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion here, and even though we have more questions to be answered, the Perth County Council receives the MPAC delegation presentation. Mover and a seconder. That'd be Councillor Duncan and Councillor Hurley. Can I see your hand go up, Councillor Hurley? Okay, those in favor of that motion? That's carried. Perfect. So do you have a timeline for receiving the questions?
It depends when you guys want to bring it back to council or make that information back.
Okay, so the sooner the questions comes in, the sooner it comes back to council. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, this is just a suggestion, I guess, and this could have maybe come up under new business, but I know the Roma conference is coming up in February. They're looking for, send out an email about delegations, and I think it would be great if Perth County asked for a delegation to one of the ministers with regards to reassessment and why they keep kicking it down the road and the impact that it has. So I know we've wrote a letter, but I think if we made a delegation in person, or if it's by Zoom, I'm not sure how it's going to be.
It'll be Zoom.
Yeah, that we just keep driving that home to them.
Okay, well, we can, when Laurie's back, Laurie's away today, dealing with family issues, so
Yeah,
we'll.
I just think it'd be worthwhile if we.
Between Corey and Annette and Laurie and whatnot, we will pursue that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. Next we have Amara Tartik. I think I pronounced that correctly. And that's our climate change coordinator. And then we'll get her up on the screen. We'll move on with her presentation. I see her name. There she is. Oh, there she is. Keep bouncing around up there. I keep looking and I'm like, oh, there she is. Okay, good morning, Amara. We're all set and ready for your report.
Good morning, Warden, and good morning to all the councillors. So today I will be once again presenting the greenhouse gas emission reduction plan for Perth County. I know by now all of you would have seen me present this to your individual town councils, So I will try to keep it brief. Is the presentation up?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so good morning again, everyone. My name is Mara Kartik. I am the Climate Change Coordinator, and I'm going to be presenting the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Plan for Perth County. So to start, this is through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. The partnership program was signed in the year 2019. And the aim of the program is so that the PCP members commit to adopting a community greenhouse gas reduction target in line with the Government of Canada's target, and to adopt a target that is either similar or more ambitious. So the PCP program is based on a 5-milestone framework, and based on this PCP platform, the community emissions were compiled and uploaded into the tool, which then assisted in calculating the total emissions for each sector. It should be noted that 3 of the 5 milestones in the framework has been completed to date. As this greenhouse gas emissions plan covers the 3rd step in the process, the adoption of this plan means that we can proceed into the implementation phase, or milestone 4, and begin strategizing the integration into the community. This next phase in milestone 4 will include a reevaluation and survey of the projects that have been in progress since 2017 and deducted from our emissions totals towards our reduction target. So this graph shows the total regional emissions of Perth County. So this includes the City of Stratford and the Township of St. Mary's. And it was calculated off of the baseline year of 2017. The greatest contributor was from the transportation sector, so that is a combination of the 2 yellow sections on the graph. And this includes on-road transportation such as personal vehicles and off-road vehicles such as tractors and other agriculturally related vehicles. And this makes up approximately 54% of the total emissions. This is then followed by the building sector, which makes up approximately 38% of the total emissions, and then followed by the 3rd contributor, which is from the solid waste sector of 8%. So similar to the graph before, this is specifically looking at Perth County, so with the exclusion of the City of Stratford and Township of St. Mary's. And similar to the graph before, we can see that the transportation sector is the largest contributor, so that is a combination of the yellow section and the blue section on the graph, which is accounting for 71%, is then followed by the building sector, which accounts for 25%, and then followed by the solid waste sector of 4%. So just to quickly go over some scenarios and projections of emissions if they were to continue as is normal today. So this graph shows the projected average yearly temperature, which would be approximately around the 15-degree Celsius mark. And what this means is that with an increase in temperature, it will have significant health effects on our community. This graph shows the average yearly ice, and what this means is a decrease in frost days does mean that the growing season in our area will increase, but it also means that there will be an increase in the pests and potential for vector-borne diseases. Less frost days also means that the type of plants and animals that we see today in our community and our environment may not be able to adapt and survive, which means that this would cause a decrease in our ecosystems and biodiversity. And these 2 graphs show the projected cooling degree days and the maximum temperature at 30 degrees Celsius. And what this means is that it's indicative of a longer and more intense summer. We would need more air conditioning to be able to maintain a comfortable temperature during the summer months. And the higher maximum temperatures means that it is an indicator for health and environmental risk, such as heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. So looking at the approach to the climate adaptation plan, so the plan identifies various actions and strategies to move forward on increasing our adaptability and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions within the community. So the approach to the greenhouse gas reduction plan is to ensure that there are both short and long range planning in programs and initiatives to constantly be building and ensuring climate change is included in our future plans. It is important that we mainstream climate into our practices, plans, and decisions. And to ensure a smooth transition, it is an inclusive plan that covers the likes of key stakeholders, individuals, and the community. So the plan is broken down into 7 sectors, which are the ones represented here. And it is also broken down into targets, actions, and goals. So quickly focusing on the actions for each sector, I will begin with the government sector. And it is through the municipal and county governments that we are capable of effectively engaging the local community on climate change, local action, and resiliency projects. The local government can properly engage communities so that we're able to make a real change and be part of the decision making within our community. So by adopting a climate lens, such as the one provided by the Clean Air Partnership, it helps to analyze the relationship between current municipal decision and future municipal decision as it relates to climate change by being able to assess and give a probability as to what the results could be considering climate change. The second sector is the building and land use sector. So having a green building standard will not only help to boost our local economy, but also addresses the priorities that have been set through the development of this plan. So that is air quality, energy efficiency, water quality, and solid waste. In the business and industry sector, it is important that we support our local businesses to join a local green business hub and to help them maintain a sustainability toolkit, which we know by implementing sustainable actions into businesses not only improves businesses, but also improves their efficiency and reduces costs overall. In the transportation sector, as we've seen in the graphs before, it is the largest contributor to our local greenhouse gas emissions. So there is an opportunity to push the reduction of this sector of emissions through supportive actions and policy implementation. That is by having a transportation master plan or developing better connectivity and promoting active transportation, as few of the actions suggest. In the waste sector, the ideal solution is to move towards a zero waste community and to support a transition to a circular economy. So by targeting and planning for waste-related changes and projects into the coming years in each municipality, this plan can also help to set targets for waste diversion and waste reduction, which are both crucial in reducing the waste that goes into our landfill. Focusing on the natural environment, there are many projects that have been implemented to date and that we can implement moving forward across the region to increase our naturalization and sequestration opportunities. So by planting and renaturalizing, we know that there are many co-benefits, and this can often be assisted by local schools to encourage a deeper connection to the environment and allow an opportunity to teach biodiversity and land use, So the naturalization of spaces is important as it allows for the natural and native biodiversity and ecosystems in the community to return and thrive. And finally, looking at the agriculture sector, it is to ensure that the farming community has access to funding and resources to continue implementing resiliency projects that reduce runoff and in turn improve our local water quality. So this slide highlights the goals, and to briefly go over each goal for each sector. In the government sector, it is to make sure that climate considerations are embedded into all municipalities and to provide educational resources. In the building and land use sector, to create a greener, more sustainable, accessible, and energy efficient neighborhoods. In the business and industry sector, to support and to support sustainability and climate actions in our local businesses, in the transportation sector, to support and plan for future transportation changes, needs, and priorities, in the waste sector, to reduce the waste going to our landfill to become a zero waste community, in the natural environment sector, to preserve and improve our natural ecosystems and assets, and finally, in the agriculture sector, to support local agriculture resiliency and mitigation projects. So this plan is intended to be a support for the community to lead in climate action and led by our municipalities. This implementation strategy will allow the municipalities and the county to be leaders in climate action while allowing for the shared responsibility. It is also important to know that there are external organizations that we can use as external resources, as well as to partner to ensure the successful and smooth transition into the implementation stage. And by being able to budget and plan for climate actions, which would be more accessible through the adoption of a climate lens. And there are different avenues of government funding for green projects that are constantly being updated and renewed. So the important overall message to take away from the adoption of this plan is that it will showcase how our communities are all connected and working together to create a healthier, more prosperous future, and that can be achieved through this greenhouse gas reduction plan. Thank you.
Perfect, I got my screen back. Okay. Comments or questions with regards to this report, Councillor Hurley?
Oh yeah, no, good. Thanks. Tomorrow we met the other night. I apologize here. I hope my internet's good.
It's shaky at times.
We're having severe weather out of the blue here. Pretty common this year at my house. Anyways, yeah, no, it definitely has been quite the undertaking here. And, you know, I know it's been a little hectic with COVID and such. We all have a story. We can almost write a novel right now. I will say, though, it went almost, you know, year and a half, never heard nothing. 2 years, here we are. I received one email and it actually went to junk, and I never got a call or nothing. Now, I know this was supported up in North Perth, and I'm suspecting they were kind of guiding this approach. I've been in contact with the grain farmers and such, and with their first lady we had, there was never no response. They have great concerns right now with grain farmers, local chapter. I look at this and I read and I see more of an urban 100%, you know, we're very rural here. I see nothing on crop sequestration of emissions built in, just that we're polluters. And it makes it very difficult for me. It's quite heavy-handed. And, you know, I continuously read, it seems like I'm swamped with it. Smart cities, affordability, living wage, all these buzzwords, and the UN is interesting. We can talk about that. It's kind of all over this paperwork here, and I have concerns. I'll just say this, though, here in Perth County, we have, say, our 475,000-ish acres of farmland. If we were to be all planted in corn, that sequences 17 billion pounds of CO emissions. A lot of people don't know that, and it's completely avoided here. And, you know, we hire experts and we look for this and this grant, and it's frustrating that this is so missed. Again, our local chapters want some involvement here, grain farmers, and they have great concerns, as well do I. And thank you. I'll leave it to the floor.
Councillor Kazenberg?
Just as sort of a point of privilege, Mr. Warden, Councillor Herlick represented the notion that North Perth guided this project, and I want it made clear that in fact there is a staff committee that serves as the guides for this project that is constituted of representatives of every municipality. And while North Perth is the contract holder and payer of the salary of the climate change coordinator, that does not put us in a disproportionate place with regards to managing or shepherding or stewarding this project. So I think it's really important that we understand that There are representatives from every municipality that is steering this project, and any sense of concern or therefore it has to be addressed to this multi-partite committee.
I know John McClellan, who's on the screen there, he's our representative from the county staff. And I believe Daryl was appointed from the councillor. I'm not sure who the Perth South one is.
Can maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can. Anyway, Deputy Warden Eggets had her hand up.
I just do have a few questions here about where this process is going. So I guess my first question, and I'm going to say a few things and then someone can answer them for me, please. Going forward, what is the work plan going forward with this item? Back in 2019, when we started this, I looked up the minutes. I looked up to see what we had asked to be done. And so that in the report that we got, it said the main task of the climate change coordinator is to develop a community-wide greenhouse gas emission plan, which is what we have before us this morning for each partnering municipality. And then they were to update our conservation and demand management plan. So we have the plan before us, right? So from here, are we moving together as a group? The 7 of us asked for this done. Part of the problem I see with the 7, and this is, I guess, my second question, some of us are rural, some of us are urban. We all have different ideas. We all have different needs. Even amongst the 5 lower tier and the upper tier, we're all at different places. Some of us have already done some of the things that are in this plan that we see today, and some haven't. So I guess I need to know where the plan is going. Also, we're not all on the same page of what we're moving today. Perth South moved to adopt the plan. North Perth moved to adopt the plan and implement it, which is totally different. Implementation is totally different than the actual plan that we're seeing today. The city of Stratford, they recommended that the plan be adopted and that the council provide direction on setting the emissions reduction targets for their city, and that they adopt they call it the one plan living principle. But also they voted for their staff to develop an implementation plan for the goals and the actions set out in the plan that would include hiring more staff, dedicating to apply the climate lens of the city's project while helping council and achieve their Stratford climate goals. That tells me the city of Stratford is going to implement their plan on their own. And the same with the town of St. Mary's. They've sent it to their town's green committee, who's going to develop an implementation plan to further reduce their efforts. That also tells me that St. Mary's are going to go on their own now to implement it. So I'm trying to figure out where we're going now. Like if we adopt this plan, then to me, it's up to each municipality to decide how they're going to implement it. Are we going to implement it as a group? Are we going to implement it individually? And what are the standards that we have to implement it to? Are there minimum standards? I guess that's my third question. Are there minimum standards that has to be implemented to? Or we decide what percentage we want to hopefully reduce our emissions over the next few years? So those are some of the questions that I have. I guess, where is it going? How is it going to be implemented? Is each one implementing their own strategy? Which we need to have a lot of discussion if that's, like, each municipality has different needs. Thank you.
Okay, I'll let a mayor respond to that, and I may have a comment or two, but I'll let a mayor respond to that first.
Thank you for your questions, Deputy Warden Eggets. So I think to start off, I think it's important for me to differentiate that this is a guiding document then. It is to support your action plan. And moving forward into the implementation stage, as I've said, I will have to do a full re-evaluation since 2017 of the ongoing projects and the projects that have been completed. as it relates to the reduction of our emissions and towards our target goal. And through that means I will have to have conversations with each municipality. And in terms of the city of Stratford and township of St. Mary's, I will have a play and a role in their committees that they have. They have their own governing bodies within their staff that deals with this already. So my role there is to help update their emission reduction target and to be able to decipher all of the information and data that we have from the projects that have started since 2017, because that is our baseline year. So that is the beginning of the work plan. The beginning of the work plan is to understand exactly where we stand today since 2017, because it has been 3 years. And well, since the joining of this program, 2 years. Sorry, is that right? 4 years and then 2 years, yes. That is the information I give you today. The implementation strategy for each municipality will have to, it is a big undertaking, and it will have to be, as you said, each area, even though Perth County is rural, each area is unique in their own ways and they have their own focus.
I think each municipality has to decide what they want to implement. I don't think it's a given that we're going to implement something, because what was asked to do was to create the plan. So we have the plan. Now it's up to each individual municipality to decide where they're going to go with that. Are we going to implement it? Do we meet the standards? Or, like, I think there's still a whole lot of homework here to be done on each of the municipalities' parts. Like I said, North Perth already said that right in their motion. They're ready to implement it. Perth South didn't. And Perth East, we haven't come up with our motion yet. So I think we have to pay attention to the wording of the motions and what each of the councils are going to do.
Okay, I'm just going to interject there for 1 second, then I'm going to go to Councillor Duncan. So part of what she's just presented here is she's just finished saying she has to go back and redo the info from 2017. So that's going to put a different spin on some of this here to start with. But yeah, we do have to get some updated information. And I got more comments later, but I'll go to Councillor Duncan right at the moment.
Further to Deputy Warden Agats' comment, to the best of my knowledge, North Perth's motion, and maybe I need to discuss it with our council, but it was create an implementation plan to move forward with the stuff that was in this plan. And I think there's a lot of really good stuff in this plan. Like, just reducing CO2 emissions is not just about the environment, but it's also a cost-effective measure to all of our lower tier municipalities and our county with reduced fossil fuel usage. Now, does this mean that we need to start saying to people, oh, you're bad because you use fossil fuels? No, it means we need to look at the future and see how we can create best practices to reduce that usage. Now, there is things like Daryl mentioned that I mentioned this at North Perth. I was disappointed to not see the fact that in a predominantly rural agriculture community, there was no data on carbon sequestration. And I think that's a big part of our plan. Like, we have a huge natural environment that sequesters carbon in Perth County. So I think it's in the implementation plan, I think we need to see some more of that data to decide what the net emissions are, not the gross emissions.
Councillor Height.
So, Amira, remember me? I was your first question. The question was, what's our net zero? Did you get the answer to that question? No. So Perth County as a whole sequesters 3,261,350 tons of carbon on an average year of our four major corn groups, our corn, wheat, soy, and hay. That doesn't include pasture or woodlands. This is right off the website for the climate control. And a carbon sponge does 10 times in cultivated land. So when you cultivate, it absorbs 10 times. That was my question I want to get an answer today. I want to get to say, Doug, I looked that up. So there's the answer to Matt and Daryl, how much it does. Now, as soon as we were on the website that night, it didn't take long when people started, somebody sent me this. I didn't look it up. Someone who was watching our website said, well, Doug, it's right there. There it is. So we're doing our part. My next, so there's a number that Perth County does. Sequesters that much carbon. We're already paying every day. Transportation is our biggest mistake here for carbon. But every day the government takes tax from every liter of fuel I use. Where is it? What is it sequestering? What are they doing? They're paying your wage, I assume, because we got a government grant for this. But there's another huge number of amount of money that we do. West Perth did not adopt this. Rhonda leaves us out every time. Deputy Warden Higgins. We set it aside to see what kind of answers we were going to get on this one. So the three things, and I believe Stratford and St. Mary's, they've already, as Rhonda said, have got their people in place. We need to check with them to see if they want our help, because we're assuming they want us to go forward, but they might just do it on their own. So there's three things that I look at this. I mean, I got right down into the weeds last night, and down on page like 95 of the 100-page report, there's numbers in there that says we produce this much carbon and we produce this much, but we don't, definitely it isn't the 3,200,000 tons. I've also got the Perth County pork producers picked up on this. They wanted the site. So other people are watching and listening to what we're doing here. And I think Mayor McKenzie will speak to it probably, that we didn't adopt it. I don't know where we're going as a council in West Perth. I don't know where we're going as a council in Perth County. We're already at step 3 going to step 4. But I think we're not all on the same page right now. So that's all I'll say. Thank you, Ward.
Councillor Wilhelm has a question or comment.
Yeah, I just have to comment on this report under municipal and county emission breakdown. We have railway that runs through Perth South, St. Mary's, Stratford, and Perth East. Yet in this report, it only shows 1% emissions in St. Mary's, nothing for the other 3 municipalities that the rail runs through. And I find that a little odd, but anyways, that's not a big deal. The question further to what Councillor Ait said, we pay approximately 11 cents a liter on carbon tax. And I hazard a guess that that means Perth County probably sends the government over $1 million a year. What do they spend the money on to reduce carbon? And what does Perth County, how much do they get back out of that $1 million that they send the government? Can anyone answer?
Well, I'll interject for Amara here. I'm pretty sure she doesn't know, and I'm pretty sure none of us will know, because they've never really explained where that money goes, to the best of my knowledge. So the big thing here is, any other comments or questions? Councillor Kasenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So, when I look at this plan, what I see is essentially a house with a whole bunch of rooms that have some general furniture dropped in there by the movers. And what has to happen next is we have to decorate that house. We have to paint the rooms. We have to move the couches and the beds and the dressers into place. And as I think, I don't think Deputy Warden Eggetts is wrong. That's a significant local issue for each of the parties to this plan. And maybe we're not used to thinking about the sort of semantics of the word plan, but this is sort of a high level plan that says, here's the house and here's the rooms, and we've put the furniture and stuff in place. Now go to the paint store and buy the colors you want. Move the furniture to where you want it to be. And let's see if we don't get this house to be a thing of beauty. And to me, we have to be careful about saying we're not prepared to adopt this plan, because the plan is setting the house stage, if you will. And yes, there's work to be done. And the question I think that Deputy Warden Eggets asks is an important one, and that is, how much more work is there in this for the climate change coordinator or an office of climate change? And do we want to march in lockstep or not? Well, of course, we've heard the arguments for not marching in lockstep, which are that, there's discrepancies, and you can see them on the graphs of the contributions of sources to greenhouse gas. But that said, there are some things we should do together, and there are some things that we should do apart. And I think that that's what the next part of the work plan has to be, is to identify those places, and perhaps council has to have a significant discussion about what we're prepared to do together. But I think we need to identify those places where we're prepared to act together, because there's efficiency and because we're going to deal with that anti-red tape agenda. And those places where we believe that lower tier governments or the single tier governments need to act on their own. And we're seeing evidence, thank you, Deputy Rhonda Eggets, for your research on that, that other municipalities, the single tiers, Stratford and St. Mary's, appear to have some structures in place, some staff in place in some cases, and are moving on their own. But I think it behooves us, because we're in this county of colleagues, if you will, to have at least a discussion to say, what are the things we're going to do in lockstep? Can we choose the right colors of paint together? And so I urge us to think about this plan as part one of a two-part plan. And part two is a mix, probably, of concerted effort and a differentiated effort at each of the lower tiers.
Deputy Warden Eggets.
So how do we get to the next part? I guess that's my biggest question. How do the CAOs and the mayors meet? Do each of the councils have discussions and then bring their concerns or stuff forward? I'm just not sure how we get to that next step.
Councillor McKenzie has a comment.
Well, I think we have to realize that this is a work in progress. It's been said many times, and I have to agree with many of the comments that Councillor Kassenberg has made. This isn't going to go away. It's not something that we can sweep under the table and just forget about it, because it's here. And I'm not sure if Councillor Wright wants to take on the responsibility of filling out the forms every year to send into the government on what our greenhouse gas emissions are, but I know we don't have the staff in West Perth to do that. And I think the best approach to proceed is by working together. I don't look at this as any different than having an accessibility coordinator where we all work together for that cause. This is a similar cause, and I think we can achieve what we need to achieve by working together. If we all go out on our own and start doing our own thing, we're not going to get anywhere.
I'll give Deputy Warden Eggets one more and Councillor Hurlick, and then we're going to end this shortly.
I hear what Walter's saying, working together. I just don't want the group to be too large that it takes, like, it's going to take an awful long time, right? So the cities, to me, the urbans need to do their own thing, and it sounds like they are. But as long as we're sticking together as Perth County, we're not too big. Should we maybe 2 go one way and 3 the other? Or if we can do it all 5, great. But I don't want to wait or wait too long to see how long that's going to take to come back, because like I said, we're all at different stages, even in our municipalities. So maybe we have enough things that we are, that we can do it together, or maybe 2 should go and the other 3. I don't know, but I guess we need to work through the process and try to figure that out.
Councillor Hurlick.
I'll just say it is complex. We still need some individual identity here. And again, I get everything takes time. Somebody who's borrowed a bit of money in my day and wheeled and dealed, and you know, I'm from a good family, but not a real rich family. And I've had to show all kinds of flow charts continuously after working 50, 60, 70 hours a week to get ahead. The idea that we can't come up and say how much fuel we use, how much hydro we use, which vehicles are doing what, and compile that and keep track of that. I'm suspecting staff has that information, and the idea that we can't file that or have one person who goes through and files it all for all municipalities, and that it's just so overwhelming. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that. And then what all the rural's doing on the side, it's so crazy. And I said this the other night, there was a census done, and that data is collected, the farm census, what crops were growing. Doug alluded to it, and it gets uploaded. So it's there as well. And a lot of this stuff is very available. I'm sorry, but it is. Again, I'm not here talking about myself and oh me. These are the realities of life we live in. So much of what's in here is overlapping what we do already with conservation authorities, and these are the issues. So some of it needs ejected. And I have no problem proving and showing we're always doing what we can. We've done affordability and studies and return on solar projects. We've had consultants in at Perth East. We just finished that up. You know, I cringe when I see more employees, enforcement of bylaw. You know, you run out of spending other people's money, and we need to be responsible. Yes, we can do some, but there is overlapping here. Again, I have great concerns how this is drummed up, where it's coming from. You know, some may say I have my tinfoil hat on too tight. Well, here we are with COVID too, and I had my tinfoil hat on too tight. It's not looking the best. So I have my concerns. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop comments right there. So I got to make a couple comments. Again, you know me. So I consider this plan to be in its infancy. So I agree with Councillor Kassenberg's comments with regards to the plan. It's a plan, but it's in its infancy. It does need some fine tuning. We have to get some more information. The mayor has already told us she has to get some updated information. There's a couple points made by different councillors, and I was actually thinking about it because I'm looking at the 7 areas here. So Perth County is predominantly agriculture, so that's probably going to be one of our primary focuses. So I think maybe it's time to think just outside the box, because one of the comments was to form an agriculture committee. Well, we've had one for years. I don't know if they've ever met in the last 10, have they?
Not for quite a while.
No, there you go. But what I honestly think we need to do when we look at the agriculture side, not just try to solve this within ourselves. And I think Councillor Hurlick made the comment, like, let's get some input from the grain farmers of Ontario. Let's get some input from the federations. You know, because I've had calls with regards to these plans. Some of the farmers actually were filling out the surveys back in its infancy, and they'd phone me up, and I can't say online what the comments were, but you know, they were kind of negative towards it. And Councillor Duncan, so we're not just all polluters, we do sequester. So in order to move this plan forward, and it's a good basis to start with, to move it forward, we just need to get more information. We also have to find out the benefits of agriculture, not just the negatives. And same with transportation. Transportation would be number 2 you want to deal with. I'm not sure how you're going to do that. I think the price of fuel at $1.50 a liter is going to reduce your dependency on fossil fuels pretty quickly when I look at how busy my road is, because it's not. You know, but again, shifts, time change, different things change. But there are a couple things, and I kind of alluded to this when Amara made her presentation first. So, like, there are some stats on here that I'm not sure if she's can put these together or the previous one, but there are stats on this report that are basically inaccurate, because it was zero wastewater going into anything. Well, we know that's not true. And so I've had farmers phone me up and say, oh, so you want a clean water policy for Perth County? And the comments to me, and Councillor Wilhelm knows that I've already had this discussion with the Minister of Environment. I said, that yes, there are runoff from farms. I'm not going to say there isn't. But then you've got cities dumping millions and millions and millions of gallons of raw sewage into the rivers. And then when they get an algae bloom, you blame it on the farmers. So I said, you have to deal with this as a whole entity, not just keep picking on individual groups. And maybe you think I'm nuts when I'm saying that, but we do need cleaner water, but it isn't just agriculture that has to create that. It has to be the cities. Everyone has to create that. So anyway, I think we do have a good plan to start with. But again, I agree with Todd, is, you know, now it's time for us to do the rearranging. And what we want to really hone in on, but I do believe, and Amara's already said this, she's going to get updated information. And it'd be nice to get how much we sequester as part of not just what we pollute. So having said those comments, I have a couple motions here. And one is that Perth County Council receives the Creating a Healthy Environment / Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan report. And Perth County Council adopts the Creating a Healthy Environment / Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Hurley, you're moving that?
I would have liked to make one more comment. Sorry, my fault. My
We're going to
hand
get a
jumped
motion on the floor first. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Kazenberg is a mover. Do I have a second? Councillor McKenzie. Now it's time for your comment or questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. Again, I stay steadfast. We need to be very careful here. We can get into an issue of overlapping projects and staff tripping over each other. I'm saying we're looking for work, but we have to be careful. I always get a comment, this is rural municipality. It's out of our wheelhouse. That doesn't bother. That has nothing to do with us. There's so much of this data compiled already that we can use, and I want to clear that up. We need to be sure that it's found. And we have to, each municipality has to have engagement in this. And I just need that to be heard and documented. And, you know, just because everything's in there, we don't need to adopt everything. I'm not in favor of multiple employees being hired. So we go from there. Thank you.
Other comments or questions with regards to that motion? Deputy Warden Higgins.
Do we need an amendment to have more information come back to us, or will that information just come?
I believe that information is going to be brought back by Amara, from what I understand here.
That's what I would assume.
Well, I want this clarification that it is, that assuming it will, that it will come.
Okay, so it has said in our report, next steps, the plan, once adopted by council, will include a survey of the current projects, the inventories, et cetera, towards reduction target. It's actually right in our report.
So as long as that doesn't mean though that we're automatically implementing, or are we implementing a plan?
No, we're adopting the plan, and
Right.
the process of creating your targets and everything is about to start.
Okay, just, all right, just that
Correct me
we,
if I'm wrong there, Amara, but I think that's all I understand this.
So once the plan is adopted, the beginning of the work plan towards the implementation stage is to begin this reevaluation of the numbers and projects that have occurred since 2017, to have a better view of what has been done and what needs to be done and what areas need focus and what areas we can pull back on, and that kind of assessment.
so we're getting an implementation plan. Is that correct? Just for clarification.
Shaking her head, yes. Okay. Councilor McDermott. He's on mute.
This means though that any lower municipality though can change some of the things that are in the plan if they don't feel that that's appropriate for their municipality, because there's a lot of stuff in here. It's provincial, like a green building thing. That's your building plan. So that's really not something that the county can do. That's your, yeah, that's building. So that's not something we make anything that we make anything for. That's the province. So just that the lower tiers will still get to have a plan that's fits them. That's all.
I believe that is the intention.
Yeah.
And Mara's shaking her head up and down, said yes.
I would just like to reiterate, like, this plan was for 7 different municipalities, cities, and townships. So it had to be broad and expansive in a sense. I would have loved to create a plan coming into this position specifically for each of you and being able to get all that data for you, especially in a rural agriculture area. But given the timeline and that I've had to work with, I know the previous coordinator had some difficulties as well in her time in this position. But I can only account for my time, and I've been on this position for 4 months. So I'm doing the best that I can with the 4 months that I've had and been in this position. And moving forward, I will take all of your concerns into the implementation stages. And just to reiterate, there will be a reassessment of the numbers and including all the information that has been brought up and requested to date. And that will hopefully have a better, broader picture for everyone to assess within their each municipality.
Perfect. So I have a motion on the floor. It's moved and seconded. Those in favor of that motion? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12. She passes. She's adopted. Okay, so we look forward to the next steps, Amara. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to move on. So now we're moving on to, I've got so much paper. Staff reports. We're moving on to planning. And Sally, is Sally doing this? Let's get Sally up here. What time is it? Oh, that took a little longer than anticipated. Well, maybe we're going to do this planning thing, and then I believe we're going to take a quick break. Morning, Sally.
Good morning. Good morning, Warden Aitchison and members of council.
So we're ready for the planning report.
Very good, thank you. This morning, what I have for you is a modification for a subdivision. It's in Atwood, which is in North Perth. And it was given draft approval by this council in January 2020. And I just need to account for my slip up where in the report it says 3030. That would be pretty impossible. So 2020 January is when this council gave draft approval for the subdivision. It's a residential subdivision and it has lotless blocks in it, which means that as the development comes forward in phases, they are going to propose the individual lots. And we have the chart, which we've introduced in this modification, actually, that helps us monitor the number of units that are anticipated in each phase so that we can constantly reconcile with the draft approval that you granted to ensure that the targets with respect to units and type of units are being met. So this subdivision is very close to registering phase 1. There are 4 phases, and phase 1 includes some of the lotless blocks coming forward for individual lotting, for residential, the park and the stormwater management facilities and the roads for the blocks that are in that phase. And what we're doing today is looking at a modification to the approval that was granted. So the modification today is technical in nature. And what I mean by that is that the number of units, the type of units, the layout of this subdivision, the road pattern, the park itself, the stormwater, and the servicing required. None of that is changing. But what is changing is some of the numbering of the individual blocks, and the sort of the boundary of the phases within the subdivision. And I wanted to include this chart in the document that sets out the approval, so that it is being fully utilized as a tool of communication between the municipality, the county, and the developer about expectations for each phase. So in my, I'm gonna bring up a slide just to show you how the phasing boundaries are changing. Okay, so maybe a nod of heads if you can see the subdivision in front of you. Okay, very good. So if you can follow my cursor, you can see I've added a few yellow lines here. One of them is here. This is the multi-block. And the other yellow line is here. So the yellow line indicates where the boundary between stage 2 and 3 previously existed and where it's moving to. So I've indicated some arrows, how the boundary has changed. So essentially what we're talking about here is the order in which the different phases, the specific attributes inside of each phase will occur, and not any change overall to what will occur, just the order in which it occurs and how the order in which it will be registered. So as I've mentioned, registration for phase 1 is pretty imminent, and they have met all of the conditions that was set about by this council. To do that. Technically, you have delegated the authority for final approval to myself as manager of planning. And since they have met their conditions, I, in theory, can sign off. But our plan, our approval that was issued really specifies these things, the phase boundary, the numbering of the blocks. And so I'm actually not able to issue that final approval because the developer would like to change these stages and the boundary of the stage and the numbering of the blocks. And that's to align with some of the purchase and sale agreements that they have in place for builders who are going to take on the construction of the homes on the individual lots, and for various registration paperwork processes. So viewing this application for a modification as both minor and technical in nature, I am recommending approval of the modification, which then facilitates the registration of phase 1. So I'm happy to take questions from council. I did have sort of a summary here. What we're asking, or what the developer is asking to change, is just the plan itself, which is that picture which I've just shown you. It's an attachment to the approval. The wording of condition 20, which specifies a requirement for a fence in phase 1, and that fence with the shift in boundary would be in phase 2. So I need to change that phase reference. And I want to include this chart as an important communication tool so that the expectations of all the parties are very clear for the rollout of each phase. So that's a summary of the changes that will occur in that approval document, should you choose to approve the modification today.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, questions for Sally on this? Councillor Katzenberg?
Thank you, Sally, for the report and for updating the file. I think everything does generally seem in order except the process. And my question obviously is, you have identified that there's a little bit of an unusual process in that this did not come to North Perth Council first. My understanding is that that is our usual procedure. And so I'd like some explanation as to why North Perth Council is essentially not going to see this until it's a fait accompli.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing it up. I had a difficult choice to make. The developer is under a very, very tight timeline for registration of phase 1 in order to meet the purchase and sale agreements that they have for the construction of those homes on the lots in phase 1. They came to me with the modification. They've been working through some of the details of the modification with the planner, with staff at North Perth, with myself, and with their lawyer. And given that the timeline is quite tight and that the modification, in my professional opinion, is both minor and technical in nature, I chose to bring it here instead of circling back to North Perth, which is our practice. Our interests in working collaboratively are still quite strong. And our practice to go back to the lower tier council is both for information and for impact, so that they can have insights as to what is changing. They can influence with their endorsement or not, perhaps how this council may choose to approve or not approve an amendment. And in this case, there simply wasn't time if I was going to be collaborative with the developer and their needs. So given that it was technical in nature and somewhat minor because the units aren't changing, the roads aren't changing, etc., I did choose to streamline that and come straight to county council instead of circling back. And one of the things that this council may choose to consider in future is whether or not an amendment such as this, which is minor and technical in nature, is something that you want to delegate or not delegate to staff. And certainly that's something we can talk about in the future and how we would do that, and what kind of parameters would have to be met for something like that. But this is an example of something that might meet that criteria. So that's my response to that question. It was a difficult choice, and I chose a streamlined process for something that was both technical and minor, in my professional opinion.
Councillor Kazenberg.
I don't want to opine too strenuously. I understand, but nevertheless, the sort of privilege of North Perth Council has been kind of violated here, and I just want to make it clear that until the process is adjusted or corrected or improved for the sake of efficiency, this was a bit of a boo-boo, and I'm bound to hear about it at my council meeting at some point soon.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions actually with regards to this report and its modification versus perhaps the process? No offense, because this is what we're actually dealing with. The process we could deal with at a later date if we want to make changes. Questions with regards to modifications? Not seeing any. I have a motion here. Perth County Council receives the modification to draft plan approval for subdivision NP 18-03 by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Delegations Holdings Limited report, and Perth County Council approve the modification to draft plan approval for subdivision NP 18/03 by MHBC Planning Limited on behalf of Delegations Holdings Limited, as in the attached draft plan with revision date of October 7th, 2021, and following 2 amendments to the text of the conditions. The block and phase references in condition 20 pertaining to the installation of a fence be amended from block 15 to block 9, block 20 to block 10, and stage 1 to stage 2 to reflect the revised draft plan, and that the attached chart describing the lot and blocks by phase be included for reference in condition 11. Mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Kellum, seconded by Councillor Wilhelm. Last chance for questions. Those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We're going to take a 7 or 8 minute break. What time is it? 10:55. Let's be back here by 5 after 11 at the latest. So And if we can bring up Maggie. She's next, right?
Yeah. Second off on the screen.
We're going to start, I said 5 after. Okay, it's 11:05. We're going to reconvene. Oh, there's Councillor Hurley. Morning, Maggie.
Good morning.
We're all ready for your report.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, County Council. Through the warden, as always, I'd just like to provide a very brief update on our PC Connect September operations and our operations to date. So in terms of ridership, we actually just had our most successful month to date in September with a total of 205 rides completed. So our ridership total in September increased by 64% compared to the previous month. And Route B specifically saw a 168% increase in ridership with 118 rides in September compared to 44 rides in August. So our marketing and advertising efforts are ongoing, and we're really putting a lot of focus into our community outreach and our employer engagement. So as things start opening up, we're able to get out into the community and really spread the word about the PC Connect service. We have distributed over 5,000 route maps to date to municipal offices, residents, and school boards. And we also plan to distribute another 5,000 within the next few weeks to more residents throughout the county, as well as employers. So as you may be aware that this past Monday, the new extension of the GO train service began operating. So the new extension to London, St. Mary's, and Stratford really allows residents to connect to and from Kitchener, Waterloo, and all the way to Toronto. So we have been in touch with Metrolinx just for more clarification on the program and to learn about the potential for increased service frequency. And Metrolinx did confirm that their intent is to slowly introduce the service into our region by introducing only one train to start and slowly building the service levels up from there. So with the pilot project starting off with only 2 trips a day, both early morning and late evening, it does make it challenging for us to adjust our current PC Connect schedules to really operate as a feeder service. So that being said, we are working closely with our service provider to really determine potential schedule and service enhancements that will enable PC Connect to better complement the new GO train expansion. So our goal is to work closely with Metrolinx and our project partners and community stakeholders to really integrate PC Connect into the new GO expansion and really build a case for continued GO train expansions in our region. Unfortunately, we have had a few incidents with our PC Connect bus at our St. Mary's Town Hall stop location. So we are working closely with the town of St. Mary's to rectify this ongoing issue and overall improve the service being offered in the town of St. Mary's. So that does conclude my very brief update to County Council today, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Maggie. Any questions for Maggie with regards to her report? Not seeing any hands. Not missing any, don't think. I have a motion for County Council receives the PC Connect September update report. Moved by Councillor Wilhelm, second by Councillor McDermott. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much, Maggie.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Next, we move on to corporate services. And Annette.
Thank you. So this is a new report, which I propose to provide you monthly going forward, but I do invite your feedback in terms of format and content. The purpose of the report is to provide you with a quick overview of what's happening in corporate services. And I don't propose to walk you through each project or update because it is all there in the report, but I'm gonna mention a few highlights and updates. So first, Archives received some very positive feedback after digitizing and making available to the public the City of Stratford directories And this is actually quite the success story because this project was more than a year in the making. So it's wonderful to see it come to its fruition and to receive positive feedback. Speaking of feedback, court services also received some very positive feedback about how well the courts are being managed. And I think that's really important to note because of the impact and changes that have been brought about with respect to COVID and having to move to a Zoom platform. Perry Group Consulting Limited has been working through its first phase of the GIS strategic plan. This is a 5-year comprehensive plan. And they've met with the CAOs of the municipalities to gather their feedback for challenges and areas of opportunity. So it's nice to see some interaction and to hear from the CAOs of the municipalities about what some of their concerns are. And Legislative Services has reported that the changes that were approved as a part of updating the forestry bylaw, that they're working well as well. In terms of updates, again, I'm not going to walk you through all of them, but I want to mention a few. For court services, the Ministry of Attorney General is drafting guidelines for the resumption of in-person court appearances, and we hope to be notified soon by the Regional Senior Justice of the Peace for when those can resume. GIS, they have been busy and they report that they have provided report assets for 14 planning applications and updates to their parcel data have been completed after they've reviewed over 200 severance and consolidation activities. Cybersecurity, IT and finance have been working together to identify areas of opportunity to ensure appropriate protection of the county's data and systems. And finance has been busy with budget preparations for 2022 and will provide its quarter report shortly. You'll also note within the report that the 2020 audited financial statements were delayed, and this is a result of the consolidation with HPPH. Legislative Services continues to work on the county's record management project to digitalize all records and create a central repository. They're also working on various activities and projects related to accessibility, which include site plan reviews and standardized checklists and program documents. As well, they're accepting applications for the community grant program. The report also outlines some continuous improvement projects, including upgrading software in court services, changing website providers, search providers, information and records management in archives, preparing training for accessibility, and again, looking at the issue of cybersecurity. The report also includes a section on professional development to highlight the bench strength of our staff as they attend various programs and conferences. And the report includes a section on highlights for upcoming months, specifically budget preparation for 2022 is underway. The annual accessibility report is coming forward, and the warden's election will be happening soon. So with that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and if I can't, I will track down the answers for you.
Thanks, Annette. Questions for Annette with regards to her report? Deputy Warden Nagels, your hand up.
Just on the audit, so they have not started the audit at all?
I believe that they have started it, but it was delayed in receiving information that was needed.
Okay, as long as they're at it now. Oh, okay.
That they are.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Kazenberg.
Not a question, but in response to Annette's comments about the format of this report, I thought it was excellent. It was very easy to digest, and I certainly appreciated this report.
Thank you.
I'm sure she appreciates the feedback.
I appreciate your appreciation.
Okay, other comments or questions? A motion, Perth County Council receives the legal/corporate services September update report. Moved by Councillor McKenzie, second by Deputy Warden Nagels. Those in favor? It's carried. We're going to move on. Then we have Corey coming up. It's funny we would get the impact financial and performance review the same day as the other presentation, but here we go. Morning, Corey.
Good morning, Warden Aitchison and Council. Yes, it was planned to have MPAC here to be able to answer questions from Council related to specifically my report, as well as their presentation to council. The report is here in front of you, but I believe it's just the start of what is going to be current discussions with MPAC and the province in relation to the August 5th notice of motion from Councillor Kasenberg. In the report, you'll note within the financials are attached to the report, a reassessment for MPAC costs them about $9 million to do a reassessment cycle. With the delay in reassessment, you didn't see an outflow of $9 million in any particular year, especially essentially 2020. That would have reduced their investments as a lot of their investments are held within reserves, and the reserves make up a good portion of the investment total that they do have on the financial statements. All I can say with the investments and the financial statements of MPAC is that they are well suited to potentially deal with any impacting significant liabilities that they have, maybe better than some other municipalities that are here in front of you today, actually. And then aside, the second part of it, it was the assessment taxation review and the conversations with the province and our standpoint with relation to the delays. The delays, I don't know if they take in consideration, but I think the consideration on the pandemic, they focused on business as a impacting factor and an impacting factor on delays. Potentially what we would see, and maybe a potential reassessment, is a shift potentially on residential and from business, and business might even see a benefiting factor with the reassessment in the coming years. I think the standpoint is yes, the pandemic has created this significant increase in residential values. I think they need to get back on track. Going back to the 2020 year before the pandemic actually would have happened, they would have taken valuations basically of December 31st of 2019. And they need to get back on track with relation to reassessments going forward. So that is the pieces of the report. If there's any questions with respect to that, I'll try to answer them.
Questions for Corey on this report? Councillor Kasenberg.
Mr. Warden, with your indulgence, may I suggest we use the same approach we did for the delegation from MPAC, and that questions can be submitted to Corey that are appropriate to his report that would warrant a little bit further digging into a couple of matters, because I certainly have, again, a list probably of a dozen questions, unfortunately, and I would appreciate seeing some of those answers. I suspect that he will answer some from a professional judgment perspective, and that others probably do need to be referred down the road to MPAC, but I'd let Mr. Bridges coordinate that if that's reasonable.
Yep, that's totally reasonable. Does that work for everyone? Mm-hmm. Not seeing anybody say no. So if you got some questions in regards to this report, I just have one quick one. I can't believe, or comment, I can't believe they had $10 million in cash sitting at the end of the financial year. But that's kind of blows me away, to be honest with you, for a corporation like MPAC. Anyway, so if there's no questions other than the ones that are going to get sent to Corey, then I have a motion that Perth County Council receives the MPAC Financial and Performance Review Report. Moved by Councillor Wilhelm, second by Councillor Wright. Those in favor? Carried. That wasn't a question, that was an in favor, Councillor Kasenberg?
Actually, I wanted to suggest that maybe there's an amendment that's needed there, that's sort of an interim report, right? Because I think if we ask questions, then we expect those to come back to council. And I don't know whether we want to view this as an interim report with a final to come after questions have been posed.
Well, I don't think you're going to see anything changed on their report, because it's basically their financial report as the end of their operating term. So I'm not sure.
But I think
if you want to ask questions, we will and send them in. That's fine. And then we'll have a report come back as soon as the questions are answered. I won't say next meeting, I'll say as soon as the questions are answered. So the sooner the question goes in, the sooner they get answered. Perfect. Thanks, Corey. And now we're going to move on to, what's that?
That was carried.
Oh, yeah, that was carried. Just that Todd had his hand up. I wasn't sure if it was a question or he was voting in favor. Okay, next one is, we're moving on to John McClellan, or is it John or Bill? I think it's John. Morning, John. Again.
Morning, Warden Aitchison and Council. I'm going to handle the first report, and Bill Wilson will handle the second. So the first report is just to update Council on the progress of the more major projects Facilities Division has undertaken in 2021. I'm not going to walk through the entire report, but we've completed some important upgrades and capital maintenance improvements at our facilities. And we've done so pretty much under budget with most of these activities. Obviously, our largest project, the courthouse elevator, is on hold, and we hope to update Council on the results of the funding application later this year. The report also briefly outlines several projects slated for 2022 and the years following. This includes a number of maintenance projects on the exterior of the courthouse that will be planned once the elevator project is completed. It also outlines a few roofing issues that we have and projects that were not previously identified. And we just wanted to give Council a bit of a heads up on what's coming down the road and not catch you off guard at budget time. And I'd be happy to answer any questions in regards to this report.
Questions for John? Not seeing any. I have a motion. Perth County Council receives the 2021 Facilities Division Update Report. Moved by Councillor Kellum, second by Councillor McDermott. Those in favor? That's carried. Perfect. And we have Bill. Yeah, there he is on the screen already. Perfect. So you're doing the next one, Bill?
Yes, I'll present this report. Thank you, Warden Aitchison and members of council. Similar to John's report on the facilities side, this report serves to update council on some of our more major capital projects and some more of the significant operating undertakings that our department has worked through over the past few months. I guess just happy to report that as far as our road construction projects go, they have all been, for the most part, completed at this point. Construction went reasonably well, good conditions, and things were completed in a timely fashion with minor disruption. Just to maybe note the budget variance projections on here, you will see more updated numbers there on your Q3 and year-end projections report, but they are all trending to be under budget. Yeah, with that, there was also some on the operating side, we had some road safety undertakings with the school zones. Those have all been installed and are operational, and we've received positive feedback on those. Similarly, for the safety signs that have been moved throughout the county road network, we've received positive feedback on that as well. And finally, just some cursory outlook on some of the projects that we will be looking to propose for next year's capital budget. And if there's any questions, John and I are happy to take them.
Thanks, Bill. So questions for Bill on his report? Looks like you're going to get off easy. It's a good report. I have a motion here. Perth County Council receives the 2021 Roads Capital and Operations Project Summary Report for information. Moved by Councillor Kazenberg, seconded by Deputy Warden Eggets. Questions or comments? Those in favor? That's carried. Perfect. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're gonna move on here a little bit. Next we have council reports. Anybody have anything for that? Not seeing any hands go up. And we have bylaws. And the only bylaw is confirmatory at the end, so we don't need that one right away. And notice of motions. Don't see any hands. Other business, does anyone have anything for other business? So I'm gonna bring up one little item, so if someone wants to stick the name in the warden's election hat, that is identified at the first meeting in November. Correct. So some people want to pursue that. That will be declared the first meeting in November. Anyway, no one else has anything under other business? Announcements? Closed session. So we need to move into closed session with section 239 of the Municipal Act as a closed session pertaining to a matter pertaining to labor relations. Moved by Councillor Wilhelm, second by Councillor McDermott. Those in favor? Carried. We're in closed session. Okay, thank you. Bylaw 3841-2021 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation of the county of Perth at its regular meeting held October 21, 2021 is read a first, second, and third time and finally passed October 1, 2021. Moved by Councillor Duncan, second by Councillor McKenzie. Those in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn at 12:14. Councillor Wilhelm, Councillor Hurley. Those in favor? That's carried.